Imagine to have the same thing that you have with fintech solutions that allow you to allocate and distribute your portfolio across each stock that you have in your portfolio and predict the annual yield that you're going to receive. Imagine to have the same exact things for marketing, your market mix. This is what a market mix modeling is. It's a guidance and tells you exactly what you should do, and it enables you to delegate the risk of taking a decision to the tool and the analysis and everything instead of getting the risk. And generally, it's more accurate than a human because these models handle complexity better than a human brain.
Gabriele, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for inviting me.
Really excited to chat all things MMM today. Would love if you could give the audience just a brief background into your experience as a marketer and a founder.
Definitely. So I'm Gabriele, CEO and co-founder of Cassandra. My journey in the marketing mix modeling world started in 2021. I founded previously a marketing agency that helps e-commerce businesses grow through performance marketing. And in 2021, I managed 12 million euros in advertising investments for my European clients. At the time, me and my current CTO and co-founder were working on the agency, and our role was to systematize decision-making inside of the agency. We had to have procedures and tools to systematically improve clients' performances. And we could optimize most of it. CRO, experimentation, A/B tests, they're easy to systematize, but there was one thing that actually blocked us to the bigger obstacle that we saw was media allocation. At the time, iOS 14, 2021, iOS 14 came out, making Google Analytics was not reliable anymore. So we had a lot of money, a lot of responsibility. We had to maximize revenue for our clients, but we had no clue on how to do that. We took a look online. We saw Nielsen and Kantar selling services that were called marketing mix modeling. They were charging between 100K and 500K and required 6 months in order to have an output. And when I saw that, I thought, right, this is outrageous. My client is going to churn on me if I wait 6 months in order to change something in their marketing mix. So I've decided to copy exactly what they were doing, start studying econometrics and statistical modeling, apply it on my clients. Results were really positive. And then I thought, all right, this is something really valuable for clients, but only I in the agency can run this analysis. What if other marketers that don't know anything about statistics and coding want to use these methodologies? How can they do that? And at the time, there was no solution. So this is why we created Cassandra, a platform that enabled non-technical marketers to analyze their marketing mix through the best practices of marketing science. So design and analyzing an incremental test, running and building the marketing mix model, and integrating and triangulating multi-touch attribution data from advertising platform with marketing mix modeling and validate them through incremental tests, all in one platform.
Amazing. The MMM as a tool has become much more relevant in the past couple of years. It started in the 1950s, Mad Men style days, right? Funny to think about that. You know, there's some really old folks out there that were using this to run, print ads and TV and things like that on a completely different product set. And now the use case is more for digital brands, things like that. If you had to kind of give an overview of the landscape today in terms of where the different categories of media mix modeling tools lie, how would you kind of present that and think about that?
I believe there are three main categories in the market right now. Right now, there is a renaissance of marketing mix modeling because digital tracking systems that were really easy to use are just deprecated. We need to go back to the methodologies that were more difficult but more reliable. Right now, there are three main players in the market. There is big consultancy businesses, Kantar, Nielsen, GroupM, that do really extensive and really heavy modeling experiences and services. They cost a lot, they have a lot of responsibility, and they can go and charge these prices mostly because of their authority and their branding. The second stage and the second sector is open source libraries that actually disrupted the market. Marketing mix modeling was something black box, and after the release of Robin and then Google Lightweight MMM and Orbit and now Meridian, it's not a black box anymore. Everyone can do and see the calculations that are behind. Now, they're really good because they democratize everything, They show how algorithms work behind that. They require statistical knowledge to be used and technical knowledge. And there is a new wave of marketing mix modeling solutions like Recast, Mike that you already interviewed, Cassandra, Salforte, and other players in the market that allow marketers to receive these insights without having a technical team behind that actually runs this analysis. In this scenario, there are two types of companies. There are the companies that provide directly the solution. The company, like other player, build the model and then show the results through an interface and application in which you can refresh over time with one click. And there are other tools, more like Cassandra, that enable them marketing team to build the model in-house. So have your marketing team and connect all the data and model in-house, setting your own priors, your own calibration data, etc.
Yeah, and it is interesting because the outputs of this can be very valuable to marketers. However, as you mentioned, depending on your budget, your team size, your understanding, it can be quite complex. And this varies by different startup companies as well. And what I mean to say is that could be brands out there that are managing media mixes at scale, seven-figure monthly budgets, but only have one data analyst on their team because they haven't had to, hire more. Um, we're kind of in this boat right now where we're trying to understand the landscape, and you really need to have someone knowledgeable to build this stuff out for you. So, and one of the things too, I think that brands might be struggling with is when they see this new technology or old technology that is then being updated, they think about all the different answers that it can get them, all of the different problems it can help them solve. Media mix optimization is tricky, especially operating at scale, especially operating at very high levels of granularity. What I've experienced so far in starting to onboard an MMM and think about this stuff is that I have to be really specific and smart about what I can rely on an MMM for. And I don't want to, overpromise to maybe an executive team on what it can do for us. When you think about use cases for a media mix model, what are some of the things that it's very good for? And then what are some of the things that maybe people get wrong and mistakenly try to utilize it for?
Oh, definitely. We talk to an average of 30 to 60 brands per month. There are a lot of misconceptions in the market. Someone thinks that marketing mix modeling is a tool to understand how to allocate money first, then how to analyze creatives, understand what creatives works best, what's the angle of the ad that works best, and understand qualitative and quantitative data simultaneously. Sadly, this is not the case. Marketing mix modeling is a quantitative decision-making tool. Its main purpose to decide how to allocate your marketing budget to maximize revenue. Obviously, it allows you to diagnose the past, understand how the ROI change, and diagnose what are diminishing returns. But it's mostly used to allocate your money and see a lift in ROI from your marketing investments. Yeah, there are a lot of misconceptions out there about what it can do, how frequently you can refresh it, how frequently you can run it. You cannot use it as Google Analytics. You can use it at a monthly basis or weekly basis, but you cannot use it at a hourly with hourly granularity. And there is a lot of complexity. And I agree with your thesis. I mean, when you are a multi-market brand and invest seven figures advertising, market mix modeling is really expensive to run and resource intensive. Game that I see and the huge opportunity that I see there is not in technology, not in revolutionizing the new algorithm out there, is to solve the UX problems that analysts have scaling up these methodologies. How hard it is to adopt it, how hard it is to understand it, how hard it is to calibrate it. Cassandra mainly and I believe that if we can solve this gap, we could actually solve the adoption problem. Because the easier the tool is to be adopted, the easier it is to educate customers, and the easier it is to have mass adoption in the market. for something that is valuable, and everyone agrees on that too.
Sure. I think that's obviously something that's very important. However, I would say that there is interest, at least on my end, to understand how the sausage is made to a certain degree. Meaning, like, what are the differentiators between models? That's something that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today. If we think about media mix modeling as source that allows us to take a lot of inputs, measure an output, and then find correlation. When we think about the inputs that we're putting into the model, one of the big things that I've seen as differentiated between a couple of different tools is the utilization of spend as a primary input versus impressions, clicks, kind of more engagement based data. Nielsen, for example, focuses very much on impressions. Their perspective is that that is more of a indicator of customer action and can find correlations that way. But then there's other models that focus more on spend. What is your perspective on this?
This is really interesting. So, how much you spend determines how many eyeballs see your ad, and based on how many eyeballs see your ad, you have a certain conversion rate on those, and you generate sales. This is the main thesis there. Now, when you use optimization algorithms, though, and you want to correlate the spend to the impressions to the output that is going to predict, we found A/B testing this that using spend has a better accuracy on forecasts. And this is, we validated in our in-house. Then we talked to the meta marketing science team, because we became partner 1.5 years ago, and they supported our thesis. We are more on the spend level. We only use spend to measure it. Obviously, there are limitations. So if you include, in Italy, there is TV ads, and the CPM for TV ads changes a lot based on politics, based on seasonality, and based on a lot of people. So what you will see is higher uncertainty on those channels that have more politics determining the CPM versus others that don't.
I think one of the promises of MMM is that it allows you to measure harder to measure things. It's become popular because of the loss of measurement on digital, where folks overinvest. Facebook, Google, as a result of iOS 14.5, responding to things like cookie deprecation, which now Google is walking back on a little bit as of yesterday when we're recording this, which is kind of ironic. But for me, as much as some of the measurement has changed on digital, it's still good enough in terms of like operating a simplistic media mix. However, what I struggle with, and I think what a lot of marketers struggle with when scaling a media mix, is thinking through how do we deploy budget towards the harder to measure things that we know have large growth potential: influencer marketing, SEO, organic content, some of these things that don't have tracking, simply put, don't have easy to track things, but we know have an impact. When you think about some of these harder to measure things from a attribution standpoint, we can use spend as a way. But then in a lot of these areas, and I think we should get into the nuances here, right? In a lot of these areas, the spend might be something that is averaged out over a time period. Like influencers, we might say we're going to spend $300,000 this quarter, and then we just average it out on a daily basis. Things like affiliate marketing, do you take the spend when the conversion comes in, or when you're serving the impression, right? There's all these little nuances. So how do you think about kind of like measuring and tracking some of these like non-digital areas?
There are three categories of factors that you can include on average in a market mix model. The first one is media. And media is everything that you can control in terms of how much you allocate in each media type. Affiliates are not including those because you pay after the sale has been made. Then you have organic factors that are, you can include all the organic factors like email sent, SMS sent, or WhatsApp messages sent, or affiliates. So how much traffic affiliates have generated for you. And then you have context factors. Context factors include internal factors like promotions, discounts, etc., and external factors like if there was COVID, if there are drastic change in temperature, change in how much it rains, competitor sales, and so on. The tool needs to be helpful in terms of decision making about media allocation and understanding what's the incremental contribution of media with respect of other type of activities that we do in the market mix. For example, it needs to tell you what is the optimal, the best discount that maximizes revenue for you. It needs to tell you how much, if the seasonality that we're going towards is going to have a positive or negative effect. It needs to drive a list of insight that can guide you towards making better decisions in your market mix activities. And the reason why you need to include organic factors in the media mix, in the market mix, other than just media, is because in adding those allow you to isolate the incremental contribution of organic factors. Because if you don't insert them, that incremental contribution is going to go either to baseline or to the other media factor and are going to show you a biased view of what's really happening in your market mix.
One of the things that I've seen with a lot of these tools is that you want to see volatility and spend changes frequently, and you want to give the model a lot of changes to be able to determine kind of like a correlation to the KPI that you're looking at, which is easy enough to do with digital. You can kind of pulse spend. A little bit more challenging to do with things like organic or influencers. How do you think about solving for this problem? Like, and I'll give an example because we're structuring this data, right now. We have a brand partnership that is an annual contract. So comparing the spend there, looking at it day over day, you wouldn't see a change. Month over month, you wouldn't see a change. Quarter over quarter, you wouldn't see a change. Year over year, you would see the spend change. So this less frequent spend change, is this still things that an MMM is good at, kind of like identifying and then correlating? Would it be able to look at, comparing 2023 to 2022 and then find that correlation?
If there is change, it's going to detect it. No, the problem when you have a lot of variables and really small variance in your input variable and small variance in your output variable, it means that you're going to have a hard time understanding what factors contributed the most and that much. It's going to have harder time to split the individual independent contribution of each factor, and you're going to have higher uncertainty. And higher uncertainty are driven by, you can see that based on how wide the confidence interval about their ROI measurement is. And what it could happen is that the ROI confidence interval would be extremely wide when you have really, really low variance. But yeah, mostly that. Generally, though, there are always changes in the output variable that you can see. And based on these changes every day, every week, etc., you can actually assess a normal incremental contribution per each variable that you insert in the media mix.
Do you give a recommendation on the number of inputs or granularity that a model should be given? Again, I'll give a specific example. Some modeling tools can model down to the campaign level. There's brands that have thousands of different campaigns. So that level of granularity requires a lot of assumptions, and there's probably a lot of uncertainty there, versus if you were gonna say, something, recast perspective on this is max 30 inputs, and anything more than that is a little bit too complicated to model, and we don't have enough confidence in that level of granularity.
A similar rule. It's not a standard value. It's you need to have on average 10 rows, 10 time record for each variable that you insert. This is the first rule. So if you want to add if you have a weekly data set and you want to add 5 variables, you need to have at least 1 year of data, in which you cannot model seasonality. If you want to add seasonality, you need 100 rows, the weekly level granularity, and you can model up to 10 variables. So based on how much historical data you have, you can include variables and you can add granularity. There are additional steps, though, that you need to follow, additional data requirement that you need to have in order to have better granularity. And we can usually start at a campaign type level granularity. For example, Google search brand versus Google search non-brand. We can split them if there are these requirements. One of these requirements is that you need to have low multicollinearity with the variables that you insert, which means that they need to move individually. If they move together, if two spans move together, it doesn't make sense to split them because the model will not have, unless you calibrate it through an incrementality test, it will not be able to split them and understand what's the individual incremental contribution of each factor. Then you need to have at least 10 non-zero values inside of the data set. For example, if you invest on TV and you invest on TV just for 2 weeks every year, and you have only 1 or 2 years of data, it's going to have a really hard time to assess the true incremental contribution. We need to be careful on number of variables versus number of rows, how much multicollinearity there is on the data, and how many non-zero values each variable has in order to reach statistical significance of all the incremental measurements that we do. Does it make sense to you?
Yes, for sure. And it's challenging because when you're operating at scale, you are making micro adjustments all the time that as a percentage of your overall spend might be quite low. You know, if you're spending $10 million a month on media, you might be having a Facebook account manager that is making $200 budget changes, right? And there's all these little micro adjustments that you're doing in the individual, in the isolated level to improve performance based on what those CPAs are in that specific campaign. And I think probably marketers might think we can rely on an MMM for this, but that's simply not the case. When I think about how we're going to be operationalizing MMM, I think of it as a much more of a higher level channel allocation forecasting tool to inform different experiments that we want to run, but not necessarily as like a campaign management or like a, you know, micro budget adjustment tool. But what's your perspective on that as far as operationalizing MMM?
I agree. It's a strategic tool overall. You know, there is each campaign. Let's say you create a model with Google Ads. You have a variable which is Google ad spend, Facebook ad spend. Now, what you do in marketing mix modeling is you create something called ad stock. You model what's the effect over time of your investments on Google Ads and Facebook ads. So there is a big change. There is a big thing we need to consider there. In Google Ads, you have different campaign types. One is Google Video and Google Search. These two have really different ad stock effects. One is an upper funnel campaign, Google Video, and Google Search is a bottom funnel campaign, which means the effect is instant. There is no delay between the moment in which I invest and the moment in which I have the maximum output, which means that I believe at a certain point, you're going to have to split based on the final stage in which split by campaign type and by the final stage in which each spend is in order to model properly each marketing mix model. And the quality of a marketing mix model that comes out only depends on the quality of the historical data and how independent each variable was historically. This is why for us, it doesn't make sense to run once a year or once every semester MMM, but you need to have frequent refreshes over time in order to manually force the variance in your data and enable the model to increase robustness, decrease the uncertainty over time. Because in our experience, the model cannot be used right after the modeling experience unless you've run incrementality tests previously. You need to have 3 months on our process in order to achieve a robust model.
Let's talk about that. So, you know, that's something that I think is very unique about the newer stage of MMMs, folks like yourself. Nielsen, for example, charges a large amount of money for one model, which then we can pay extra for updates, but that is something that could be done on a quarterly basis, right? It's not too frequent. When you're talking to marketers and setting expectations, what is your perspective on the number of remodels and the process in which the tool gets smarter to then have more confidence in the results?
Our onboarding experience works in this way. We have, in the first month, we set up the KPI connectors. We have the data cleaned automatically, and then we create the first model. Then we share with the client. After we share with the client, we set the expectation on how to interpret these insights. It's really good to assess R-square or accuracy of the model, but you need to assess also the level of uncertainty and the risks that there are following these insights in real life. There are always risks. Michael, in one post from Recast, said marketing decisions are not deterministic. They're more like bets. You make a bet to have an outcome, a positive outcome, but there is always risk next to it. And very much agree with that, because you need to understand the risk associated with making decisions over each measurement that you do. And your role, our role as a market mix modeling provider, is to decrease the risk as much as possible. And we do that by, in the second month, we run an incremental test on the most uncertain channel. So in the end of the second month, we refresh the model and we use the output of the incremental test. We use GeoLift, but you can use conversion lift or any other type to calibrate the new period. Clicking refresh, the model refreshes and improves in accuracy and decreases in uncertainty. We repeat this procedure for until we have confidence intervals that are acceptable for the ROI measurement, and the forecasts that the model runs actually match the reality with a 90% accuracy rate.
Using a media mix model in conjunction with incrementality or GeoLift tests is something that's becoming more popularized now. That's one of Lift Lab's major value props as well. However, I do see some challenges with it. So if you think about a media mix optimization process without a media mix modeling tool available, what a marketer is going to want to do is to optimize towards conversions or revenue acquisition. And with the absence of MMM, the correct decision would be I'm going to spend my money in the places that have the best CPAs from an attributed perspective. What that's going to lead you to do is to optimize into paid search, Facebook, direct response, right? Then if you add matched market testing to this, where you're comparing a control and holdout group, it may still be that those lower funnel channels do the best in terms of driving towards a conversion action. However, when you're operating at scale, maybe you hit diminishing returns in those and you do a match market test. Where I see a lot of opportunity with MMM is to enable you to move from the lower funnel to have more confidence in upper funnel bets that have a longer ad stock effect and time horizon in which you're seeing impact. How do you think about that?
I love this question. I love this topic. And the reasoning behind conversion lifts have this problem about using pixel data in order to attribute the performances of an incremental test. GeoLifts, though, you can choose what dependent variable to use. And we use overall sales, which means that the easiest way to validate the incremental contribution of upper funnel campaigns in a market mix model is to assess the real incremental effect of bottom funnel campaigns. It's really weird. What we do, for example, the first experiment that we always run is, let's do an holdout test on Google search brand. Let's see really how many incremental sales we generate because we're investing there. And we often see that the incremental contribution of Google search is way higher compared to what the platform shows us. So we stop spending on certain regions in the market in which we're investing. And after 30 days, let's say a number, for example, we actually see how many, what was the overall change in sales that we generated in the regions in which we stopped investing versus the regions which we continue investing. This actually allows us to have the analysis on the effect share and the fact that this change had in the market mix. We often see that there is no change in overall sales over time because we stopped investing. And this allows us to calibrate the market mix modeling, putting it 0 on the incremental contribution or a really small number as a calibration factor inside of the MMM. And the incremental contribution that would normally go to Google search would go to Google video or upper funnel campaigns with a longer ad stock.
It's tough for marketers to realize that too. If you haven't run this type of test before and then you get those results, it's shocking sometimes. And it's shocking sometimes to spend that, in fact, was incremental and performant. I know we have a few minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about some of the clients that you work with and the results that they've gotten from an MMM or Cassandra, and maybe in conjunction with an incrementality test, as you spoke about, and what that led them to do in terms of making different decisions. If you want to give some specific examples, great, but also would love to understand like commonalities that you see within your client mix.
Yeah. So, for example, we just presented on at a meta event, a case study that we did with Gina Tricot, which is a really big e-commerce slash retail in Sweden. And we helped them improve ROI by 52%, understanding, first of all, the effect over time of influencers. For how long the investment of influencer has an effect on overall sales. And then how do I capitalize all the demand that I've created with influencers? Understanding the time horizon of each campaign type in which I invest into, they've been able to first allocate a lot of money during Black Friday in influencers, and then during December, capitalize all that demand through performance marketing. And these enable them to have not only performance-based attribution system that would allow them to do micro optimization each day by day, but to have a strategic view of how much budget would be the marketer needed to allocate at the monthly level, and then do micro optimization on the daily with attribution data. Having these, it's an addition. It's like a compass, right? You don't know if you need to do 3 meters on the left and then 3 meters on the right to go to your objective, but you know that the objective is north. You need to go there. So you have a path that you need to follow and some constraints around you. Generally, unlocking one other case study that we did, assessing the true seasonality of a travel tech company that we were working with right now. They increased 80% their overall revenue year by year. What they did is they understood through the seasonality analysis how much they should have allocate the marketing budget in performance marketing during the year. Understanding how looking at the seasonality as a proxy that determines how much demand there is for your product over time, they've allocated the marketing budget in that way, and then use the budget allocator of their marketing mix model to distribute the marketing budget according to that particular thesis. And that worked really well. Generally, it's not really difficult to get to these kind of results when using marketing mix modeling for the first time, because the alternative is just doing with, at least for the clients that we work with, the alternative is nothing, generally.
Let's look at that influencer example. So, operating a media mix, I have to make the decision between allocating a certain amount of spend to influencers or potentially an app network. If I look in the absence of an MMM, I see the app network. I see I'm going to spend this amount. I have really low CPMs here because they're an app network. I'm going to drive a lot of impressions, a lot of clicks. I'm going to see some installs come in from scan. Maybe maybe I'm under attributing there, but I have confidence that I'm going to see performance. I can bear that to influencers, specifically organic influencers. I'm going to allocate that same amount of budget. I can estimate what the impressions I'm going to serve are. Say it's a YouTube sponsored ad. I can see what that is. I can calculate CPMs. In the absence of, and maybe I put a link on the YouTube video with a gift code, and I can attribute that way. However, that's going to be from a CPA perspective. If I'm just looking at attributed data, it's going to be much lower. The CPMs on the influencer side are going to be higher. So I'm going to pay more for less impressions, and I'm going to pay more for less attributed conversions if I'm just looking at attributed data. The media mix model output allows me to correlate that spend more effectively to see what the real true revenue impact would be. And so I make that bet a little bit differently. It's something I've been thinking a lot about, impression quality, and the fact that actually optimizing for the lowest CPM areas is not the right way to think about it. Now, you want a certain impression volume overall, but what the diversity of that impression mix looks like is really interesting. Like, if I'm going to trade off and I'm operating at scale, it might make sense for me to get less impressions that are really quality from an influencer that's going to validate my brand, and it's going to result in revenue. And now that I can do that with an MMM.
I agree, 100%. One thing though is you need to have the right North Star metric to optimize for that, because most marketers are evaluated based on CPA. I mean, a lot, a lot of them. And when we show them the incremental CPA or incremental ROI, it's a new metric that never seen it before. So there is a big shift that needs to be done in the market, in which marketers, professional people in this space, needs to start questioning the metrics that they've been using so far, and start considering others like incremental ROI, incremental overall sales, overall MER, or any other metric that actually can mitigate the risk of not attributing the right sales to the right channels through attributions.
Right. I think healthy skepticism is great. Awesome. I guess just closing out here, if you're speaking to an audience of performance marketers, what are a couple of things that you really want us to take away from this conversation and think about, and things that we should be thinking about as we're managing our mix?
Oh, no, I'm a marketer too, so I'm in that particular batch. And imagine to create something, to have something in your everyday workflow that can decide for you something with a higher accuracy than you do. And imagine to have the same thing that you have with fintech solutions that allow you to allocate and distribute your portfolio across each stock that you have in your portfolio and predict the annual yield that you're going to receive. Imagine to have the same exact things for marketing, your marketing mix. This is what a market mix modeling is. It's a guidance and tells you exactly what you should do, and it enables you to delegate the risk of taking a decision to the tool and the analysis and everything, instead of getting the risk. And generally, it's more accurate than a human, because these models handle complexity better than a human brain. So marketing mix modeling is something that will get massive adoption when it becomes really easy to adopt and really easy to understand. And I strongly believe that there is a lot of content between what you created, what other YouTube channels have created, that can actually help marketers to understand what we're talking about and implement it and see how cool it is to have a machine learning model that actually you click a button and tells you exactly how to allocate and predicts how many sales you're going to generate.
Awesome. Gabriele, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.